Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast presented by Underdog. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. On today's show, Star columnists Sam McDowell and Vahe Gregorian discuss stadiums and where things stand with the Royals and Chiefs. Last April, Jackson County voters turned down extending a sales tax for stadium projects, and since then there have been many stories about what the teams might do about their future homes, but it's all been speculation. On today's show, Sam and Vahe get into the possibilities and the timelines. Where are these teams going to be playing ball in the near future? Okay, let's get started. Well, it was a year ago this month that the Jackson County voters went to the polls and turned down the 3.8-cent sales tax extension for stadium projects for the Chiefs and the Royals. I don't know what I expected to have happened in the year since then, but maybe more than what has occurred. I thought we'd be a little farther along, especially with the Royals. Sam, you've written extensively about what's happened here since the vote, and your latest story actually is a return to a former a site that the Royals had identified or had been identified as a potential Royals stadium landing spot, and that was in North Kansas City. Look, I've counted at least 5 sites for the Royals since the conversation has started, and now we're back to talking about places that had been mentioned originally. So, why did North Kansas City come back into the conversation?
Yeah, I can't really answer that. But it's obviously a clear sign that, there's, not everything is buttoned up at any other location. And the Royals, since that April vote, have been really quiet about their plans over the last 12 months. I mean, to John Sherman's credit, he is an available owner, I think, and to Clark Hunt's too. I mean, there's a lot of owners in other cities that we know of that don't talk to media at all. But John has very much not answered detailed questions about the stadium since that vote, and he's not really obligated to. They don't have a vote in front of voters. There's no answers really that he's required to provide at this point, but what it's left us in the dark on is not necessarily what they're considering, but what their preferences are and what boxes need to be checked for them to feel comfortable at a location. And, I know that the Washington Square Park site downtown that I had reported last August is something that City Hall has pushed, including Mayor Quentin Lucas himself. I also know that's a really tight space over there, and that the Royals have envisioned a ballpark district with surrounding elements to profit off of that they would own. I would imagine it would be more difficult at Washington Square Park, and that was always the North Kansas City site, as you mentioned, Blair. It's not just that they considered the site; it was one of the 2 sites they announced as a finalist. So we did learn more information about just the way they viewed that site, because they had to answer questions about that site, not quite a year and a half, maybe 15 months ago when they announced it as a finalist. And we know that they liked the fact that there is just an unbelievable amount of land over there controlled by a single owner or a single family owner, which is the Merriman family. And, it's almost 100 acres. And I think Washington Square Park is every bit as tight as the Crossroads was, and that's probably not. I would guess the North Kansas City site's at least 4 times that size, and so envisioning your own ballpark village and thing of that sort, that probably comes to life more in North Kansas City, and then you're weighing the pros and cons of, okay, does it fulfill your desire of wanting to go downtown? Because they have been clear that it's in or around downtown. This is much more about the around downtown than it is the in downtown. I mean, I think you could have downtown as a backdrop in North Kansas City, but it's certainly not in downtown Kansas City.
It's in Clay County, actually.
Yeah.
So across the river. Vahe, before we get
Across
to
to a, sorry, just the real important point on that is that across to a different voting base if you do have a vote potentially for a
right,
tax.
which brings up perhaps another issue. The financial base in Clay County is not what it is in Jackson County. If it comes to a vote, and not as much money would be raised, probably, right, if it were in Clay County. But Vahe, before we get to the idea of downtown, I wanted to ask Sam one more thing. You mentioned the boxes that need to be checked. Is the biggest box, do you think, for John Sherman, the ability to surround the stadium with the district? How important is that for this to happen?
Yeah, I would imagine that's high up on the list. To me, number one is the finances. What finances can you secure at each site? I mean, that's the number one conversation. And number two, I think for them would probably be land control. How much land can you get? How easy it is to acquire? Everything downtown is not going to be simple in that sense. It's all going to have its complications. To me, that's the very reason the Crossroads proposal was rejected by taxpayers, is because they had no public plan for how they were going to acquire the land required for that site, and it was going to displace business owners. We didn't know how, when, or whether they were going to be made whole and how that was going to happen. So I think those are probably the primary two, but yeah, I think tucked into that land control is the reason that you need even more land than just the stadium, is because you do want that surrounding ballpark district.
That would help finance the team in the future. I mean, it's one of that's why those things exist, right? For owners to make money, to ostensibly to invest in the team and continue the team in a financial well health going forward.
Let me just chime into that point real quick, Blair. One of the first springs after John Sherman bought the ball club, Dayton Moore was still with the Royals, and down at spring training, he had it wasn't really off the record, but an informal briefing with a few of us that happened to be at spring training. And the thing he emphasized most was that he thought for the Royals to stay competitive in the MLB structure was to have the enhanced revenue that could come from building all this. It's just, I bring that up because it's interesting that has not really been the drumbeat of the approach. And I think it's part of what's been the problem for the Royals. The messaging has kind of been shape-shifting all along. One of the things that I also remember is one of the first conversations I had with John Sherman about it, what he used the term, well, if it's just about a beautiful ballpark, we have that. And of course, that's gotten a little different connotation through all this too, with, right, we need to move out of there. But I circle that point back to what Sam was saying and what you asked him, Blair, also, which is that quite evidently the biggest priority in what they hope to accomplish would be having the surrounding area be something that is, of note and an economic driver. And Sam, I loved how you characterized those boxes. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. Blair, I'm sorry. I think you were going to ask me something else, though.
Yeah, but that's never stopped you, Vahe, from just
Nope.
running off, taking the baton, and
taking the perceived baton.
And I've always appreciated that about you. That's for sure. Well, but it all relates to what you wrote about last week, and that is the downtown as the destination for the Royals, and why it should be there. And it goes back to original conversations, right, with that you and Sam and I had with John Sherman. And I'll never forget at the listening tour, the sort of the original or the jumping off point for all of this in terms of as a public discussion. He was asked directly about going downtown or staying in Kansas City, Missouri, and he said yes. And everything has been, to our knowledge, all of everything's been about downtown for him until the vote a year ago, and then other options became were rolled out. But if he had a choice, it would be downtown.
Well, I certainly believe that. And, Sam will remember this probably better than I will, or maybe you will remember it also, Blair. But I think one of the original sort of points of the search that they at least were willing to publicly say was that they looked at at least 14 different sites downtown. Now, maybe I'm remembering wrong. Maybe it was 14 sites. But Sam reminded me of this was something he wrote a few months ago, and I think maybe I alluded to it briefly in what I just wrote the other day. But one portion of their presentation that night at the Westport Plex Pod, the first stop in the listening tour, was why downtown? That was the whole subcategory. And again, this is not just to beat a dead horse, but I think what all seemed to be part of the grander scheme was the things you could enable and enlist to the cause that you could really only do downtown with things that can spread out within the heart of the metro area, that would be the prime driver. And again, it's not like you can't develop around someplace else, right? And that's obviously they want more space to do that with. But there was something I think essential about being in the core of the whole area that I was struck by, that I thought was important. I understand it's hard to achieve and you can't just make up a spot and put it there. But I just thought that was the best basis for this. And, look, we've all been to different cities where some cities have it this way, others don't. But certainly, Baltimore, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Denver have all benefited from this scenario. And you guys know better than I do because Blair, you've lived here for so long, and Sam, you grew up here, how the development downtown with Power and Light and T-Mobile changed Kansas City forever. I don't know if the economics panned out as they were touted to, but you wouldn't not do that if you knew what's become of it.
Well, remembering what was there before Power and Light, and which basically was tumbleweeds, and and the T-Mobile and the streetcar. I'd add the streetcar to that development as well. It really has changed downtown. And I've got a list of places that we've had the Royals considering. Correct. Add to this if I'm missing one, but started with East Village, and we've also talked about Crossroads, Washington Square Park, the Sprint campus area, and North Kansas City. Sam, am I missing one or two or multiple?
Yeah, there's a lot on there. I'm not sure which ones I can't keep track of which ones I've been told on the record and off the record, but
Okay.
yeah, there's at least maybe half a dozen. I mean, look, Vahe is right. They put like 14 cities on their initial listening tour list, but I would say like even quote unquote leaders in the clubhouse, those have all probably taken a turn at some point. So that to me is what's more striking, is that you've had a lot of ones that I think they have really focused their attention. I mean, 3 different downtown sites with Washington Square Park, Crossroads, and East Village, and then North Kansas City and Sprint campus. They've definitely looked, I will say this, they've definitely looked at other sites in Kansas. And pre-vote, they definitely looked at other sites in Missouri as well.
There was one other thing that I remembered, just because I just happened to be looking this up. One of our first reports on the possible sites got into 2 in particular, one of which was an area I've never really figured out what got it excluded. It was just west of 18th and Vine, that area over there. That had been one of our initial reports.
Yeah.
And a little bit of an odd twist on this, shortly after Mayor Lucas was elected, I had occasion to work on a piece with him or about his view of sports, basically. And we went up to the top of City Hall, and he looked around at possible future baseball stadium sites. And one of them, he looked north at the riverfront, which has since been procured. And quite activated by both the Kansas City Current and Port KC with its billion-dollar development it's got going on. Just kind of interesting how that's happened in the middle of this.
Take a swing at picking sports this baseball season with Underdog. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players' stats. Get them right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Sign up today using promo code KCSTAR to get a gimme pick as a part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you deposit. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
Well, the most recent story that the Star has written about this topic came from Jonathan Shorman and Casey Bayless this weekend, and about the impact of the economy on future stadium construction, and the feeling is to they talked to more than a dozen political figures on both sides, on Missouri and Kansas. Not a great time to perhaps be investing in stadiums with the tariffs and just the uncertain financial future, the possibility of a recession, et cetera. So another headwind, isn't it, for John Sherman and for Clark Hunt as they pursue this, the new stadium projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most to me, uncertainty about that situation would be if you have a ballot vote. I think if politicians are willing to figure something out, they would still be willing to figure something out. Jonathan had quoted Quentin Lucas in that story, for example. He was one of the dissenters, I think, to that doesn't believe it'll change all that much. He and City Hall in general is a very important voice in the Royals conversation, much less so in the Chiefs conversation, because the city and the ownership, I guess, of the new Royals stadium could change. Those buildings at Truman Sports Complex are county owned, and that's not going to change if the Chiefs want to renovate Arrowhead Stadium. So the Chiefs have been very emphatic that if they are to stay at Arrowhead, they will go to another vote. It will obviously be without the Royals. They'll be on their own. And to me, that's where that uncertainty actually comes into play is, can you rely on voters to add a tax if they're feeling squeezed at the time? And as you mentioned, I mean, we don't know whether that's going to be the case or not. I mean, that's an ever-changing topic from day to day.
How soon can something go on the ballot? It's this year, right?
Oh yeah. So Mark Donovan told us at the NFL owners meetings 3 weeks ago that they have discussed internally August or November to go on a ballot. That is really quick, particularly August, because your deadline to get something on the ballot is nearly 3 months ahead of time. Like, we're inside of a month to get something on an August ballot. I've talked to other people and other sources who indicate that August is not going to happen. So I think you're looking at November. And here's one scenario I'll throw out there that I don't know if I'd say likely, but it's at least possible. I could envision a scenario where both of these teams are on the ballot in November. And it's separate ballot issues because they are not going to go together. And that would be an interesting thing to me. Like I said, I wouldn't classify that as likely, but it's been thrown out there for some things that I've heard that I wouldn't rule it out either.
A popularity contest. I like it.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting, and Blair, you would have been covering this, is there once were two stadium issues on the ballot 20 years ago, and one passed and one did not.
That's right. 2000, I think it was 2006.
Yeah. Well, I think the vote was in 2004, right?
Yes, that's right. Oh, that's right. It was in 2004.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think we're steps away from that, but the Royals potentially could not have a vote at all. They could, potentially envision a path without a vote and then still put that on there anyway, or none of this might matter to the Royals because they might end up deciding North Kansas City is the path of least resistance for them.
Sam, you made me think of something I've been wanting to ask both you guys about, both on here and off here. So, okay, we understand that the Chiefs have, I think, the prime leverage, the prime power. They're the team, the franchise that it can essentially have more say in what it wants to do. I think with voters or more sway with that, any one way or another. But the first chess piece is kind of the Royals. And so the question I have for you guys is there any scenario where the Royals just can't figure out how to move, they don't move, but the Chiefs decide to?
I don't see that as likely. I mean, I'm not this. I have like grown out of the prediction business for this topic because they don't know what they want. They haven't figured it out. So like, why would I have figured out what's going to happen with it? But I think you were there, Vi, when I asked John Sherman the day before opening day, is there any scenario in which you're playing at Kauffman Stadium after 2031 lease? And he said no. I still think that we should probably challenge that possibility because that ensures that they have figured something out. If it's a new build, the clearance that you have to get, the land evaluation, all of that, like it is a 4-year project easily. That would be quick. And I think the Royals and Chiefs disagreed with Frank White a lot a year ago at this time. The one thing that I really pushed back on him when I had a chance to talk to him is his thought that they had plenty of time, that why now? It's 7 years before the lease expires. And I always thought, does anyone get punished for doing something early? Like, isn't it a good thing to be ahead of schedule? And now I think we are learning that it's with that timeline I mentioned for potentially a new build, with both of these teams are considering, like it's not early. Like you are getting to a point to where it could be late. And what the actual deadline on which these teams operate is, the Star Bonds expiration that sunsets like June 30th. And I don't know how eager Kansas is going to be. They could potentially renew it for a year.
For a year. Yeah.
I just don't know how eager they're going to be to do that if they don't feel like they're making momentum and like they are going to ultimately be the choice. And I think, talking to a lot of people over the past few weeks is a lot of people are in the dark about what these teams are going to eventually do. And I think if you're in Kansas, you're going to have to feel pretty confident if in order to renew that, to which Mark Donovan even told us, like, that's their timeline as well. They feel like they've got to figure out before that date. And it would be there's a reason that John Sherman has said summer. Like that happens in the summer.
Although
Clark
Sam, go ahead, Blair.
I was going to say, and just quick, Clark Hunt said the same thing. He's hopeful, I think was his line, for a summer announcement.
I would just add in this with when among the other things that seem to be at odds with each other in conversations we've had with people, and you've had many more conversations, Sam, behind the scenes, but when John Sherman says there's no scenario where they're still at Kauffman after the lease, and Mayor Lucas, in one of our conversations with him a couple months ago, I can't remember if it was in New Orleans or over in his office, but said that he wonders if nothing may happen the way things are going, that's a scenario. Nothing may happen. We'll see.
Well, let's talk about these star bonds for a second. Isn't that a bird in the hand for teams? While Jackson County officials and not even Jackson and Clay County folks, talk about Jackson County voters turn it down, and it just there's so much uncertainty on the Missouri side. Over in Kansas, they're beckoning the teams, come on over. We've got billions of dollars in star bonds waiting for you. Do the star bonds create a safe landing spot for these teams? We saw a video last week that was, I believe it was last week, where the Chamber of Commerce and the Kansas City Sports Commission got together and about a minute video where it was a call to action, just please let's work together, get this done. And I was thinking, with the idea that, if nothing happens, they could possibly leave the region. I'm thinking you've got an offer from the Kansas side on, with this. So where do the teams, what are they feeling about, the Kansas side and the ability to access star bonds, which would pay for, I don't know, up to 75%? Is that what it is? Billions of dollars.
Yeah, I think that that affects both teams differently. One, I think that the hurdle for the Royals is location. I mean, you're already in a suburb location, and to me, that's what initiated this entire conversation, was trying to change that attribute about being downtown. Nowhere in Kansas offers that possibility. With both teams, but particularly for the Chiefs, I mean, as much as you could get paid, some numbers I'm hearing for what that would cost the Chiefs are much higher than what a renovated Arrowhead Stadium would cost, because, the Royals are looking to build regardless. And so that price tag is going to change, but not dramatically based on location. And that's where the land acquisition ease comes into play. But with the Chiefs, you're talking about a $1 billion rebuild versus a $3 billion, renovation versus a $3 billion new stadium. So when you go to Kansas, your price tag changes by 3x. And so even if you could get, first of all, I don't think you'd be able to get 75% funded. I mean, you do have to sell those bonds. But beyond that, I think that ownership's price tag, well, I know for certain it increases, and I think it increases a lot, to where the Hunt family, we know at the vote and the renovation project, was going to contribute $300 million. I'm told since a year has passed and prices have gone up, that their price and their percentage would likely make the same, but that means their price would probably go up. My guess is to somewhere around 350 or something. I think it would cost them at least twice as much over in Kansas. And you could be, if you're an ownership group, weighing that option, considering, are we going to have to put $1 billion into this thing? And that obviously is a real thing that could change your mind if you're the owners.
But I would also think with the ability to, if it did land over at the Legends area, it would be a roofed stadium with the ability to attract, winter, bad weather events, which can't happen at Arrowhead right now.
Yeah, I mean, the things that they would be considering over there in Kansas, I mean, there's definitely a lot of pros to that site too. I was just, I guess, replying to, I don't think it's quite as easy as people think it is for those reasons I just outlined, but there's a lot of attraction, I think, for the Chiefs over there. You would get like a Big 12 championship in football that you're not in play for now. You would have potentially other college football games out there. And then
Final Four.
Final Four. And, Mark Donovan told me that he's on the Super Bowl committee, the site selection committee. He doesn't think that gives him an advantage, but it does give him an insight to how these sites are selected. And he says Kansas City has absolutely been discussed if it gets a new stadium. So I do think they would get a Super Bowl at one point. I don't know that they would become suddenly in the rotation for it. I think they would probably get a Super Bowl if they build new out there. But Mark Donovan, the Chiefs team president, said something interesting about that in his conversation with Clark, that Clark Hunt had said, we have a lot of events at Arrowhead. I don't know that we can get 3 times the events annually at Arrowhead. And he's probably right about that. I mean, I don't know if the summer schedule is suddenly going to get a lot more packed. It is these one-off events that we're talking about that you hope to get, into the rotation somehow.
Sam, you just answered what I was just thinking of, the crux of the question is, to what degree would the Chiefs, Clark specifically, I guess, think in terms of well, we have to spend this much now, but it's going to be worth that much later. I mean, but what you just described suggests at least a mindset that that's a number they've got to crunch to make it feel like it's worth tripling their investment for whatever they get down the road.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice. I mean, they are businessmen at the end. So, yeah, that's absolutely part of the conversation. And that, this goes back to what I said at the onset. How important is that in that conversation? I don't know. I mean, that could be atop their list. It could be sixth on their list. I don't know. But I mean, it's definitely at least a part of the conversation that they have about this.
But clearly, it's not like the thinking is we open ourselves up to infinity windfall by going to Kansas. It's not like that at all. I mean, they as you noted, with the other ways they bring in money to Arrowhead already.
Well, one thing we know is that the Chiefs have enjoyed great success traveling to places like Allegiant Stadium and SoFi Stadium in Vegas and in Los Angeles. And not only that, we know just from conversations that we've had with Chiefs that how much Clark Hunt and Mark Donovan enjoy those stadiums and see the potential for the Chiefs there. So stadiums they visit every year. I always think about that when I'm considering the topic of the new stadiums for Chiefs and Royals. So, okay, guys, great conversation as always. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Monty Davis and to Randy Mason for producing, to Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen, also part of the production team. And we will talk again soon.